Hey y'all, it's Kim. So this is an article from a lady that used to write for the Daily Beast. She now has a book called Trafficking, like traffic and then king, kind of play on words. But it's Conchita Sarnoff. But anyway, this is just an article she wrote about Jeffrey Epstein, and it's describing some of the stuff that was kind of redacted and like the grand jury trial and the stuff for Ghislaine Maxwell. So anyway, you'll see some names and stuff that weren't mentioned before. But anyway, let's just get going. So the Florida statutes are clear. Any person older than 24 who engages in sexual contact with someone under the age of 18 years commits a felony of the second degree. The victim's prior sexual conduct is not relevant. Ignorance of her age is no defense. She needn't resist physically to cast doubt on the issue of consent. For a child under 16, even lewd behavior short of touching is a felony of the second degree. But convincing a jury that a sexual encounter is a heinous crime is difficult if the victim can be made to appear willing and unharmed, not to mention vulgar and mercenary. It wasn't hard to imagine some of the victims quickly being discredited in court by Epstein's crack legal team, who repeatedly noted that the age of consent is lower in many other states. But that doesn't quite explain why the Department of Justice would forego the child trafficking charges, which pertain regardless of a girl's attitude or character. Epstein's final sentence is so out of line with the statutory guidelines for that crime that it appears the department may have been influenced by the existence of his many powerful friends and attorneys. A highly intelligent man who once taught math at the Dalton School in New York without a bachelor's degree, Epstein has been a serious and respected player in the highest reaches of politics and philanthropy. He's made substantial contributions to political candidates, served on the Council on Foreign Affairs, and donated $30 million to Harvard University. Moreover, many of his high-powered acquaintances availed themselves of Epstein's private jets, for which the pilot logs obtained by discovery in the civil suits sometimes showed that bold-faced names were on the same flights as underage girls. A high-profile trial threatened to splash mud over all sorts of big players, just as both Governor Richardson and Bill Clinton's wife were running for president. Also, a hedge fund prosecution in which Epstein offered to give evidence was heating up. Alberto Gonzales, who was U.S. Attorney General throughout most of the Epstein investigation and resigned just before the non-prosecution agreement was signed, told the Daily Beast that he would have instructed the Justice Department to pursue justice without making a political mess, but that may have been an impossible mandate given the players involved. Instead, said attorney Brad Edwards, Epstein committed crimes that should have jailed him for most of his life. He was jailed for only a few months, and this week he walks through his door a free man. Conchita Sarnoff has developed multimedia communication programs for Fortune 500 companies and has produced 3 current events debate television programs: the America's Forum from Beirut to Kabul, and a segment for the Oppenheimer Report. She's a contributor to the Huffington Post, is writing a book about child trafficking in America. Sex offender Jeffrey Epstein settles 7 more lawsuits, by Jane Musgrave, Palm Beach Post staff writer, updated 9:37 a.m. Sunday, June 13th, 2010, posted 12:41 p.m. Saturday, June 12th of 2010. West Palm Beach, billionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein is steadily ridding himself of court battles with dozens of women who claim he paid them for sexually charged massages when some were as young as 14. In court papers filed late Friday, his attorney said he has settled lawsuits with 7 more women who sued him for abusing them. The terms of the settlements were confidential, Neither his attorneys nor those representing the women were immediately available for comment today. The settlements come roughly 6 weeks before Epstein is to complete his year-long probation. On July 21st, a year after he was released from the Palm Beach County Jail after serving 13 months of an 18-month sentence, he's to be free to leave his Palm Beach mansion without telling probation officers where he's going or how long he'll be gone. However, despite his court-ordered house arrest, records show he's gone to work each day and flown regularly to New York City to meet with lawyers and to his home in the Virgin Islands. With the latest settlements, he has now paid 13 women to drop their claims against him. He's also inked agreements with another 12 women who sought damages without filing suit. He still faces 3 federal lawsuits and 4 are pending in state court. One of the federal cases is scheduled to go to trial on July 19th. As part of a plea deal to avoid federal criminal charges, he agreed to plead guilty to 2 sex-related charges in state court. He also agreed not to contest women's claims in civil lawsuits. However, with some seeking as much as $50 million, he was allowed to argue that they deserved far less than they were seeking. He also agreed to pay attorneys to represent women in settlement talks if they didn't formally file lawsuits. He recently settled a lawsuit with the Miami law firm that represented 12 women who elected not to file suit. The firm, Podhurst Orsic, was demanding $2 million in addition to the $500,000 Epstein had already paid. While Epstein initially balked, a confidential settlement in that lawsuit was announced Monday. Palm Beach billionaire sex offender Epstein offers to deposit $2 million to prove he'll pay legal bill. Jeffrey Epstein in court in June of 2008. West Palm Beach billionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein is willing to deposit $2 million in a court registry to prove he's committed to abiding by the terms of a plea deal that kept him from facing a multitude of federal sex charges, his attorney says. In court papers filed 2 days after a Miami law firm accused him of violating the terms of the agreement by refusing to pay its $2 million legal bill, Epstein attorneys this week said the 57-year-old Palm Beach resident isn't shirking his financial obligations. He simply doesn't believe he owes as much as the firm is demanding. Epstein is prepared to immediately pay any sums that the court deems are owed, his attorney wrote. However, Epstein reasonably and in good faith believes that all of the monies claimed by the law firm are in fact not reasonably recoverable against Epstein and fall outside of his obligations under the plea agreement. As part of the so-called non-prosecution agreement inked in 2007, Epstein agreed to pay a private attorney to handle claims of 33 women who told federal prosecutors he had paid them for sexually charged massages at his Palm Beach mansion when some were as young as 14. Robert Josephsberg, a partner in the Podhurst Orsic law firm, assembled a team to represent more than a dozen women. Nearly 24 women hired other attorneys to pursue civil lawsuits against Epstein. In the federal lawsuit it filed this week, Josephsberg first says Epstein owes it $2 million. As part of the agreement, federal prosecutors agreed not to pursue Epstein. Instead, he pleaded guilty to 2 prostitution-related charges in state court and in July was released after serving 13 months of a 18-month sentence. Epstein's attorneys questioned part-time prosecutor's $700,000 bill. West Palm Beach, a part-time prosecutor for Miami-Dade County, could make more than $700,000 for legal work she did on behalf of 15 young women who claim convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein lured them to his Palm Beach mansion for sexually charged massages. The prosecutor, who makes $40,000 annually from her public job, is the daughter of Robert Joseph Berg, a respected Miami attorney who was tapped to help the women get money from the billionaire money manager for abusing them when they were as young as 14. Amy Josephsberg's Aderi's involvement in the case is fueling the latest sparks between Epstein and Josephsberg's law firm. In court papers filed last week, Epstein's attorney don't mention Aderi by name or question the family ties. Interesting, isn't it? Attorney Robert Critton said when asked about the connection. In court papers, Critton is sharply critical of the amount billed by an assistant state attorney for Dade County who was not a civil litigator and had little or no specialized expertise, but it's just part of Epstein's bigger beef with Josephsberg. The partner in the firm, Podhurst Orsic, filed suit claiming Epstein's refusal to pay his $2 billion bill. Excuse me, I thought it said million earlier. Constitutes a violation of the agreement Epstein signed to avoid federal charges that could send him to prison for decades. Critton countered that while Epstein agreed to pay Josephsberg to represent the women as part of the non-prosecution agreement, Epstein wasn't signing a blank check. He said Epstein has the right to contest how much it cost Josephsberg to negotiate confidential settlements for the women, including questioning Aderi's fees. Peter Prieto, who is representing Podhurst Orsic in the fee dispute, said Critton is being disingenuous at best. Amy Josephsberg is a 20-year lawyer with tremendous experience. Prieto said of the part-time prosecutor who also has a private practice, Epstein and his attorneys knew of her involvement. And he said, so did her bosses at Miami-Dade County State Attorney's Office. Critton acknowledged that he knew Aderi had some involvement in the case. It's one thing to know someone may have been involved. It's another thing to know that the individual billed $700,000 to $800,000, he said. Prieto said Josephsberg had to hire outside legal muscle, including his daughter, to combat Epstein's failings of attorneys. In addition to Critton and attorneys at his West Palm Beach firm, Epstein had been represented by such celebrity lawyers as Alan Dershowitz, Roy Black, and Ken Starr. At a hearing before U.S. District Judge Alan Gold on June 7th, Epstein will ask to be allowed to put $2 million in a court registry until the fee dispute is resolved. While Epstein said he's making the offer to show good faith, Prieto sees it differently. Those who have dealt with Epstein will understand it for what it is. Defendants' pattern and practice of complying and reacting only after months of delay is not, in foot dragging, Prieto wrote in court papers. He said Epstein engaged in similar delays before he finally pleaded guilty to state prostitution charges to avoid federal prosecution. Critton countered that Epstein wasn't foot dragging. He merely wanted the non-prosecution agreement reviewed by officials at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. Arrested in 2006, Epstein pleaded guilty to 2 sex charges in state court in 2008 and served 13 months of an 18-month sentence in the Palm Beach County Jail. Although he was allowed to leave during the day to work, he was released in July. While he is settled with 15 women Josephsberg represented and 2 others, he still faces more than a dozen civil lawsuits. Oh, I guess it's his mugshot. Okay. Epstein's FDLE sexual offender flyer. And then billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, 53, of Palm Beach, was indicted for soliciting a prostitute. And there's more pictures. Okay, Haley Robeson. Jeffrey Epstein, convicted sex offender, Royal Palm Beach. Lawyer Jeffrey M. Herman of Miami, the attorney for two Jane Does involved in a civil suit against Palm Beach resident Jeffrey Epstein, speaks outside the Palm Beach County stockade where Epstein was held. Jeffrey Epstein convicted, sex offender, West Palm Beach. Jeffrey Epstein, the wealthy Palm Beach resident, charged with having teen girls give him sexual massages, was in court to enter a plea after nearly 2 years. And let's see. Okay, more pictures. Jeffrey Epstein, convicted sex offender. And Jeffrey Epstein's convicted sex offender. Basically, it's like the same thing. So, West Palm Beach attorney Spencer Cuban argues before Judge Donald Heffel Monday morning at the Palm Beach County Courthouse for the inspection of Palm Beach billionaire Jeffrey Epstein's penis. Oh my gosh. Cuban claims that it would be necessary to corroborate witness testimony that Epstein has an egg-shaped penis. Harrell ultimately declined the request. What the heck? Jeffrey Epstein convicted. Yeah. Okay. Like a lot of this is just the pictures. West Palm Beach, North Miami Beach attorney Jeffrey Herman conducting a press conference along with the unidentified father and stepmother of a minor identified only as Jane Doe involved in the prostitution case against Palm Beach resident Jeffrey Epstein outside federal courthouse Thursday in West Palm Beach. The family is suing Epstein for damages. Oh, and then I guess this is so just the value of Jeffrey Epstein's house, 358 El Brio Way, Palm Beach. And then there's a map of it. That's kind of creepy. Okay, attorneys settled $2 million fee dispute with billionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. $2 million dispute between billionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and attorneys who represented 15 women who claimed they were sexually abused by the Palm Beacher is apparently over. In court papers filed late Monday, attorneys representing Miami law firm Podhurst Orsic said it has reached a settlement with Epstein. Terms of the agreement weren't spelled out, and attorneys involved weren't immediately available for comment. Podhurst Orsic filed suit against Epstein last month, claiming his refusal to pay its legal bill constituted a violation of an agreement the money manager signed to escape federal charges. As part of the 2007 plea deal, Epstein agreed to pay attorneys to negotiate settlements on behalf of the 33 women who told federal prosecutors he had paid them for sexually charged massages at his Palm Beach mansion when some were as young as 14. 12 of the women sought to help the Podhurst partner, Robert Josephsberg, who was appointed to negotiate settlements. He also represented 3 women in civil lawsuits that were also settled for undisclosed amounts. About a dozen other women hired other attorneys to represent them. Most of those lawsuits are still pending. Epstein, 57, argued that Podhurst inflated its costs. He said he had already paid the firm roughly $500,000 and didn't believe he owed another $2 million. He offered to put $2 million in the court registry until the dispute was resolved, and he pleaded guilty to 2 sex-related charges and was released from the Palm Beach County Jail in July after serving 13 months of an 18-month jail sentence. In return, federal prosecutors agreed not to pursue him for crimes that could have sent him to prison for decades. Epstein's ex-butler sentenced to 18 months for trying to sell billionaire sex offenders a journal for $50,000. West Palm Beach, a former houseman of billionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein Friday received the same 18-month sentence as his one-time employer. However, while Epstein was sentenced to 18 months in jail for sexually exploiting underage girls, Alfredo Rodriguez got the same sentence for trying to sell a journal that recorded the Palm Beachers' sexual dalliances. Wow. U.S. District Court, U.S. District Judge Kenneth Mara acknowledged that it didn't make sense to give Rodriguez a longer sentence than Epstein. However, had Rodriguez given investigators the journal when they asked for it, Epstein might not have received such a light sentence, the judge said. If the information had come to light sooner, Mr. Epstein's situation would have turned out differently, Mara said. Instead, Rodriguez, 56, tried to sell the journal for $50,000 to an attorney who's representing one of nearly 24 women who filed civil lawsuits against Epstein. Further, on March 18th, the same day, he pleaded guilty to obstructing justice. The Kendall man was arrested in Miami for possession of guns that federal agents believed were used in an illegal firearm smuggling ring. He's expected to plead guilty to those charges, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Anne Marie Villafana. She described Rodriguez's failure to produce the journal as an opportunity lost for the federal government investigation of Epstein. A federal grand jury was investigating whether young girls were being brought to Epstein's mansion along the Intracoastal Waterway from other states. Some of the information in the journal and information Rodriguez provided after his arrest seemed to confirm these suspicions. Whether the journal could have been used to slap Epstein with charges that could have sent him to prison for decades is unknown, Viafana says. Would it have significantly advanced the ball? Yes, she said. Instead, federal prosecutors halted the grand jury investigation and cut a deal with the 57-year-old high-flying money manager. He pleaded guilty to 2 state charges and served 13 months of an 18-month sentence. And in addition, he agreed to pay for attorneys to represent some of the young women who claim they were brought to his mansion for sexually charged massages when they were as young as 14, and some of the women hired their own attorneys. Of the nearly 24 lawsuits that were filed, Epstein has settled all but 7 and also reached agreements with 12 women who elected not to file suit. Federal public defender Dave Brannon, who represents Rodriguez, suggested his client's financial problems, which prompted him to seek illicit ways to make money, were the result of his association with Epstein. Until this year, he had been a law-abiding citizen. Having worked for the wealthy for years, none would hire him after they learned that he had worked for Epstein. None of the wealthy wanted anything to do with anyone who was associated with what went on in Mr. Epstein's house, Brandon said. So that's the end of that. Anyway, sick stuff. But y'all, I will talk to y'all later. Have a good day. Bye.